Canadians are as unhappy as ever. That is, according to statistics. Now, this video isn't meant to be doom and gloom, rather just an objective view of the situation in Canada. You see, every year there's something called the World Happiness Report. This year, Canada's rank fell from 6th in 2013, which is pretty good, to 25th in 2025. Not so good. Now, for the younger population, aged 15 to 24, the numbers were even worse. It fell to 71, which is pretty bad considering the list of countries that rank much higher: Mexico, Australia, much of Eastern Europe, the UAE. Now, the trend is in the same direction with Western nations like Britain and the USA. Let's get to why. The permanent underclass, a recent and albeit dystopian reality for most Canadians where no matter how hard we work, the majority won't be able to materially build any sort of real wealth, time independence, and home ownership through conventional ways like a job, which wasn't the case 30 years ago. Now, this might sound a bit sensationalist, extreme, or not completely true, but the idea does hold some merit. Let's look at the facts. Number one, cost. So not only has the Canadian dollar lost value relative to other currencies like the US dollar, the cost of our goods, services, and assets within our country increased. So, for example, as of March 2024, the average home price in Toronto was $1.1 million, while the median household income was $93,000, a price to income of 12x. Compare that to 30 years ago when an average home was $196,000 and the price to income index was only 5x. That's like someone more than doubling your salary right now. Imagine the financial impact that have on you. Like, for example, to qualify for a $1 million home today, assuming a 20% down payment, which is being more than generous, you need a household income of $211,000. And even in that scenario, you're paying over 70% of your income towards a mortgage, leaving you little to nothing for everything else: groceries, food, miscellaneous expenses, utilities, savings, and investments. The percent of young people living with their parents or roommates, unfortunately, has never been higher. So, home prices, including rent relative to income, have gone up exponentially, pricing out the young from home ownership, and it's true all across Canada. Now, number two, the cost of a degree relative to income growth. And although paying good money for a worthwhile degree at a good university is a good investment, does it make sense when income growths in Canada have been stagnant while the price of degrees have gone up? It's no wonder why we're having an insane amount of brain drain and most talent leaving Canada to go to the United States. Like, for example, and these are US numbers, but the same holds true roughly to Canada. According to the US Census Bureau, the all-in cost of a degree in the 90s was $62,000, while the household income was about $60,000. 30 years later, the same degrees have appreciated 3 times more in percentage terms than household income, like 116% increase in the cost of a degree versus a 40% increase in household income. The result? A larger young population saddled with student debt, accruing interest. Let's get to the cost of transportation. And we all know fuel prices are elevated right now, and even prior to the current geopolitical crisis, we were paying well above what consumers were paying, 15 to 20 years ago. Which you think shouldn't be the case when transport, supply chains, logistics should be getting more efficient, right? But the real cost of transportation is the price of a vehicle. Now, back when the average income was $40,000 in the 90s, you were able to buy a brand new vehicle, entry-level car, let's say, for $20,000, $25,000, a ratio of about 0.5 to 0.6x your income. Now, with the average income at $60,000, you'd essentially be paying around the same amount for a new entry-level car, about $60,000, a ratio of 2 times more compared to the 90s. Now, the price of a used vehicle, which is mostly a market for the young, has gone even higher relative to income. And just like the cost of degree, it saddles the young with debt, accruing interest. Let's talk about the cost of food. Grocery, and this includes grocery, fast food, and dine-in. It is now taking a larger share of wallet for Canadian consumers, and even though the cost of groceries themselves have been relatively stable, fast food and dine-in has gone up quite a bit. On average, for a household of 3 people, the average cost of food here in Toronto is $1,100 to $1,200 per month. In the late 90s, early 2000s, the cost to feed a family of 3 was $600 to $700. Now, food costs didn't just rise, they rose faster than wage growth in many households. So that's cost. Let's move on to the labor market. In the month of February, more than 80,000 jobs were lost in Canada, one of the worst monthly job losses on record. Now, youth unemployment is even worse. Those aged 15 to 24, those numbers are at crisis levels. Over 16% of the youth are unemployed. And, well, what happens? Well, it leads to something called scarring effects. What that means is the youth have lower lifetime earnings, delayed careers and experience building, and as a result of a lack of experience, because they can't get jobs early on, they have a harder entry into the workforce in the future. Now, among those that are employed, Canada's GDP per capita, which basically measures economic output per person, is the lowest among the G7. We basically had a decade from around when Trudeau got elected in 2015 to 2025 of no economic growth compared to countries like the USA, Italy, and France. Now, with those that are employed, almost, and believe it or not, a quarter work in the public sector, so either directly for the government or a government-funded sector. Private sector jobs, meanwhile, have stagnated. When you have a country that incentivizes public sector employees more than private sector employees, you get a country that discourages domestic and foreign investment capital, which hinders innovation and growth. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy or a feedback loop where less private sector growth, less private sector jobs, and so on and so forth. And it's true, most Canadians would rather themselves invest in real estate, an unproductive asset, or own shares of US-based companies rather than Canadian. There is little investment in Canadian infrastructure and technology. So it makes sense why, Canada is experiencing what they call brain drain, where the smartest are leaving for other countries like the States. And this is a real statistic. 71% of Waterloo grads and startup founders leave Canada. Companies like OpenAI and Anthropic are filled with engineers that were fed and educated in Canada. Number 3, taxes. And although our taxes aren't as high as many Scandinavian countries, they do get more for their money in terms of social services than we do as Canadians. While in Canada, you're still paying relatively high taxes and being burdened with some of the highest cost of living in the world, primarily housing, as we discussed, without Scandinavian level services. Let's go to number 4, immigration. And it'd be disingenuous to say I, like many others, haven't benefited from immigration, with my parents migrating here in the early 90s. However, it gets to a point where there's only so much a system can handle without fracturing. Not only are the young hurting because of this due to a lack of jobs, public services, doctors, wait times for surgeries, but immigrants who came here feeling like the cost of Canada is not worth whatever dreams they were sold. Let's talk second and third order effects or consequences, and consequences of the consequences. Number 1, you have falling birth rates. Now, how do they measure falling birth rates? Well, you basically figure out through statistics the amount of children a woman has, and anything below 1.3 is considered ultra low. Canada right now is at 1.25 children per woman. So as a result, the young people in this country are not starting families, and you can argue a lot of that is due to the state of our housing market, the state of our economy, and as well as income growth and not getting much for our money. The lack of upward mobility, which essentially ties back into the labor market dilemma, where younger people, even with those with university degrees, are having a harder time getting jobs. As a result, they're not building that experience, they're not building that source of savings and investment base early on, which makes it harder for them to move up the ladder as time progresses. You're also, believe it or not, seeing extremist ideologies that lure in vulnerable and disenfranchised younger population, which radicalizes them. And you see it all over the internet with a lot of popular influencers and figures popping up with extremist and radical ideas that have a huge impact on the young, which you can make an argument wouldn't have been the case if the young seen a way out in this country with regards to their economic and personal well-being. You also have escape valves. So when you have a percent of the population or a lot of the people in a given country feeling like they can't make it out and they feel this sense of hopelessness, you see things like drug use going up. For example, marijuana use in Canada has been trending up, albeit alcohol has been going down, but that can be also due to the fact that more people are staying inside and using other coping mechanisms such as doom scrolling, social media, maybe using video games as a crutch, isolating themselves from the public, and using other various coping mechanisms which are of detriment to their well-being. As a result, mental health issues, unfortunately, are on the rise in Canada, which is not good. On the financial front, you're seeing capital flight. So a lot of money that should be pouring into our infrastructure and tech, well, that's not the case because Canada doesn't incentivize capital investment to fund its economic growth. We talked about brain drain, where the smartest people are leaving the country, leaving us with the most unproductive human capital base. And you're also seeing, as a consequence of the state of this country, civil disobedience and fraud at rampant levels. Again, this video isn't meant to be doom and gloom, although it does seem like it. It's here to paint the reality and the state of this country. In a future video, I will describe more of a hopeful side of Canada and how this country can rejuvenate itself, as we are sitting basically on a gold mine of natural resources and a nation that is not only hardworking, but are an empathetic, kind people. So I still believe the future is bright in this country. I was born and raised here. I have hope for this country, and although it might take some time, the ship can always turn around. Take care.